Hi, I'm Anna. Welcome back to Books on the Go. I'm here with a review today and then some reader likes because this book got me thinking about similar types of books. So the book that I'm talking about is The Labyrinth by Amanda Lohrey, and this is an Australian novel. It just won the Miles Franklin Prize for 2021, and that's an award for excellence in literature for a book that features Australia in some form. So Annie had read this, I think, when it was shortlisted, or she was excited about it when it was shortlisted, and then she read it and persuaded me to read it, and we just did it on the podcast. I say persuaded because even though it has a beautiful cover, and Annie had said she'd heard that it was really good. I hadn't heard of Amanda Lohrey before, and that's just my ignorance because she's been around for some years and has been winning prizes and getting lots of acclaim. And then the blurb did not sell me on it, and I'll tell you why. It's because it just sounded very quiet and boring, and it's not a boring book at all. I really loved it. So that was the interesting thing. It talks about the Erica Marsden, who's the main character, and her son has just been imprisoned for a monstrous act of revenge, which we don't know what it was. But Erica, his mother, moves to a small town near where he's imprisoned so that she can keep visiting him. So far, that's quite interesting. And then she obsesses over building a labyrinth. To create it, Erica will need the help of strangers. And then it says it's a story of guilt and denial and the fraught relationship between parents and children, and mesmerising yet disquieting. It shows Amanda Lohrey to be at the peak of her powers, which is true, but it doesn't sound like a book where much happens, and so I just wasn't sure how compelling it would be, and Annie talked me into it, which was great because I really loved it. So this book, the first thing is the writing is really clean, really precise. It's extremely well written, not overwritten, and that really holds the book together. It's the joy of reading extremely good writing. And the other thing I think is the character of Erica Marsden. She's a no-nonsense older woman. I say older because her son, I think, is in his 20s, I want to say, maybe early 20s, but her son's an adult. Her life is uprooted and really, in a sense, comes to an end when this event happens and her son is sentenced. And so she's going through that form of grief, both for her son and really for her own life as it was, and also feelings of guilt as a mother, as you would do. And yet she's a survivor, and she's also very practical. She has a dry sense of humour, and there's a wonderful scene where she moves to this town, initially stays the night in a hotel in the main beach town and sits having breakfast, and it's something like I sat at the cafe in front of me were life-size fiberglass dolphins, mid-frolic. And it was just such an incongruous scene because you can tell that she's in a really dark place and really has been suffering and is not in the mood for, life-size fiberglass dolphins. That's the sort of humour. It's very dry, which I really liked. So that's what I think really interested me, was seeing how she would pull through and how she would interact. It's her interactions with the other characters, knowing that she's a bit, I wouldn't even say prickly, but she just doesn't have time, I think, with what she's been through, and maybe it was in her nature anyway. She doesn't suffer fools and she doesn't have time. She's not that interested in forming friendships, but that changes over the course of the book. So that's really the really interesting part. And then there is this dramatic tension because you're wondering what happened with her son, what did he do, what will happen to him, and will he get through being in jail and this terrible, this very long sentence that he'll be serving, and how will they go, in their relationship with each other. And so the visits that she makes, she visits him every 2 weeks, and they're really tense scenes because he can fly off the handle at any minute. He doesn't speak. she also still wants to help him and still wants to care for him, even though he's done this, dreadful thing. And so it's a really nuanced story of that relationship as well. And that's part of the tension that keeps you reading. And then there's the tension of what will she manage to get through, and will she be okay? And the labyrinth is the way that she starts to come back to living in the world, and that gives her a project. But that's also very symbolic as well of returning to her relationship with her mother. So there's a lot of layers that you can read into it, but even on the surface, it's just a really beautiful read, and it's quite comforting in a strange way, because you have this wise older woman who is surviving and being pragmatic about surviving one of the worst things that could happen. And so it's somehow comforting to be in her company, surviving this thing, and also quite meditative, because all the pretense of her life or any facade has been stripped away, and she just notices things as they are and looks at the landscape and her people that she meets just as they come. So you get this quite meditative tone, which meditative can sound boring in a book when someone says that, but it's actually really calming, and that combined with that really clean, lucid writing makes it such a pleasure to read. So I really loved it. It's a very subtle book. The premise is similar to We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver, but this is more sophisticated, it's tighter, it's more adult, if I could put it that way. So I really loved it, and it just made me think there's a genre of books where you get to meet this sort of quite tough older woman and be in their company, and it can be such a joy to read these books. So I was thinking of some sort of reader likes, and one that comes to mind is Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout, where you have, and this is a bit softer than the Labyrinth in terms of the setup, but Olive Kitteridge is quite a prickly character, and yet you warm to her, and it's quite astringent, and she doesn't suffer fools. She used to be a high school teacher, and you can glean that she was quite a tough, I think, maths teacher, but the students also respected her, and she's got a good heart, and it's just wonderful being in her company. I like the dryness of the tone of this one as well. So Olive Kitteridge came to mind. Charlotte Wood, I think, has that similar ability to write about strong women, and The Weekend is about 3 women who come together because their friend has died, and they come to clean out the beach house, and they are all really independent women in their own different ways, and quite, they're all interesting, and they've survived the ups and downs of life, and in some cases quite tough times, and yet they've come through it, and they're surviving and making the best of it in different ways, and just their friendship is examined, and it's really good. It's an enjoyable read, and Charlotte Wood is just so grown up with her writing. It's very honest, very raw, and she doesn't shy away from confronting any of the issues that these women face. So The Weekend is a good one. And then I thought of Sigrid Nunez. So this is her latest What Are You Going Through? And again, it's an older woman, and her friend who is dying asks her to go and help her at the end. And this friend, they're not close. And so the main protagonist, the narrator, is a bit unsure about it and doesn't really want to do it, but sort of ends up feeling obliged to do it. And it ends up being quite a nice time that they spend together. And it has that same sense of, again, no nonsense, intelligent, quite erudite woman, but she's at, a stage in life where things haven't necessarily gone to plan, and yet she's finding a way through, and it's quite philosophical. Yeah, that was quite a similar feel, I think. So What Are You Going Through by Sigrid Nunez, and The Friend, which won I think the Pulitzer or the National Book Award. I can't remember now, but The Friend was also really good. I loved that one as well. National Book Award, there we go. The sticker has given me the answer. So Sigrid Nunez, similar sort of tone, and then a bit more kooky, Dunja's Last Love by Elena Bronski, translated from the German by Tim Mohr. So Dunja is an older woman who is from Chernobyl, or the Chernobyl region, and has had to leave because of the radioactivity, but she decides to move back to her village because that's her home. And there are about 12 or 13 of them that do the same. So there's this loose community, and she's a real survivor, and it's just a really fun book. There's an absurdity to it, and Elena Bronski sees the funny side of it, but also there's a depth to it as well. A bit more satirical, but this is a fun one to read. I do recommend that, Dunja's Last Love. I think I've spoken about this before on the podcast. And then I went Googling to see if there were some other ideas for this category, and someone suggested Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. So going back to some classics. So this is my edition, which is a folio edition of Mrs. Dalloway, and it should have some illustrations. There we are. So the folio editions are really lovely, and they have lots of illustrations, sort of beautiful pictures throughout the book. So Mrs. Dalloway, which is a woman who goes shopping for flowers on the day that she's hosting a dinner party, and that's really the premise of the book, but it's her interior monologue as she goes through London. And again, just an interesting woman who you get to be in her company for the whole book, and it's interesting, it's intelligent, it makes you look at life differently. Yeah, really enjoyed that one as well. So let me know. I've realised this is a very white list of authors, so please let me know if there are any that you can think of, and particularly more diverse authors. That would be great. Let me know if you've read The Labyrinth, or if you have any thoughts on similar books in the no-nonsense older women category, and I will see you soon. Bye.